So there's been kind of an interesting thing happening over the past few weeks. And after it all, I'm actually. So there's been an interesting thing happening over the past few weeks. And now I'm no longer a Ryan Reynolds fan. That's not the most interesting part of it, obviously. So the most interesting thing that had been going on in relation to that has been a series of text message leaks, or not leaks, rather than like text messages becoming public involving Ryan Reynolds, involving his wife, Blake Lively, and involving Taylor Swift. And it's kind of laid bare something that's become, well, I don't know if it's something that's become a grift or if it's just been a grift for a very long time. But I would kind of call this, well, okay, let me take a step back first. I don't think that I would say that feminism in general is a grift. But I think that in the hands of a lot of people, it's become a grift. And I think that in the hands of Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, it was a grift. And they actually managed to weaponize that against somebody who actually believes in it very genuinely. So I'm not going to go at length into the details, because if I had to go over every little detail that I've heard, it would be hours and hours and hours. I'm going to give a very, very short version of it. Blake Lively has been suing a guy by the name of Justin Baldoni. Now, Justin Baldoni is a male feminist who tried to make a movie about domestic abuse and domestic assault. And he basically had Blake Lively conspiring with a number of different people behind the scenes to try to steal this movie away from him. He had contractually bought the rights to a book by a woman by the name of Colleen Hoover called It Ends With Us. And he was making this movie, and Blake Lively, at a certain point, she decided that she wanted to have everything, associated with this movie. So she wanted to have the director's credits, she wanted to have all of the producer's credits, she wanted to have complete power over the thing. And so she pulled a lot of shady stuff. And I wish that I could go into detail about everything, but it would make this segment of the podcast just way too long if I did. But basically pulled like a lot of really shady stuff. And now, because she is foolish enough to be suing him, all of these text messages, they had to be disclosed and made public through this court process. And it's very embarrassing for a lot of people, including Taylor Swift. And so the most interesting thing that I actually found about about these text messages were the ones in particular between Lively and Taylor Swift. And so they're actually talking about something, and God, this is actually going to sound so stupid and so inconsequential to everybody that has real lives, that you're hardly going to believe that any kind of an important thought could come out of this. But please bear with me. So they were talking about Blake Lively making arrangements with her quote-unquote best friend, Taylor Swift, to try to have a Taylor Swift song included in the film's soundtrack and in the film's trailer. And they were sitting there actually talking about like this whole thing about how they thought that this was such like a, like a devious little power play. And they're kind of delighting in themselves about this, because they figure that because Taylor Swift was Blake Lively's ally, if they include that song in the trailer, well, then that makes Blake Lively the most powerful person associated with this film. And it's going to enable her to take control of everything else. And so they're literally talking, and I believe it was Taylor Swift said something like, "Oh, this guy Justin Baldoni, he is such a misogynist that he doesn't think that women can win 3D chess matches and make long game power plays." And they're kind of actively delighting in just this sneaky, underhanded, devious behavior that they're engaged in. Now, for most people, these are not quality traits. Like, these are not the kind of behaviors that you want to see in the people that you associate with. But for some reason, these two were really just getting off on just how dirty they were playing this whole situation. I mean, they were going behind this guy's back, and they were trying to get all the other cast and crew to like unfollow him on social media. Like that's like that's a weasel act. Like that's a weaselly thing to do. I mean, and just it's so weird that they would think that that would be like an important thing that they would need to do. That's crazy. And so they were doing things like that, and then they were telling the author of the book, with whom he had signed this contract, that he had the rights, he had the film rights to this book that she had written, saying that he had said all of these things about her that allegedly weren't true, and getting this woman upset with him, and then getting him kicked off of the marketing gig, and then getting him kicked off of the film promotion, and even basically like having him sent to the basement of the film's premiere, and like not appearing in photos with him, things like that. Just really like high school mean girl, like bully kind of behavior. Like not the kind of thing that you would expect to see out of people who are, like, I'm sure that they would not like to hear somebody point this out, should they happen to see this video, but they won't, because the algorithm will definitely never pump this into any place where they might come across it. But I mean, these are middle-aged women now, and they're behaving like high school bullies. So it's definitely like that's a bad look. But it actually kind of gets even worse, because they were wrapping all of their complaints in all of this very feminist language, and they were complaining that he wasn't acquiescing enough to them, he wasn't deferential enough to the women on the set, and he wasn't giving the women enough power, and they were accusing him of sexually harassing them and things like that. And so they had kind of taken their complaints, which were really just designed to try to get more power over this production, and they were wrapping it in all of this feminist language. And they were weaponing all of that against a guy who, quite frankly, I think that he's a little bit corny. Like, I've watched his TED Talk. I've watched his podcast a little bit. I think that he is definitely like one of the cornier male feminists whom I've ever come across on the internet. However, there is one thing that I don't doubt at all, and that is, I think that he genuinely believes everything that he had to say. And throughout the process of him just making the film that he had arranged the financing for, that he was the director of, the producer of, that he had bought the contractual rights to, they weaponized that against him in a way that was designed not only just to kind of gain control of the production as it was, but actually intending to destroy him forever, like permanently. Like to do the kind of damage to his reputation that he would never be able to come back as what he is, what he genuinely is. And I think that was the most offensive thing about that whole situation to me, is that Ryan Reynolds in particular, like I said, I was actually a pretty big fan of Ryan Reynolds. So I'm pretty familiar with what I would say is his thing. And his whole thing is that he kind of came to be by being, a reasonably good looking actor, who was in good shape. And then, of course, he had like this really sardonic, sarcastic, kind of cynical sense of humor that he built his career upon. And you see that in all of the Deadpool films, like you see that in Van Wilder, like all of his early work, pretty much just about everything that he's ever done. And that's the kind of thing that you can do when you yourself don't really believe in anything. And it's the kind of thing that you might do when you are so contemptuous of anybody who does genuinely believe in things, that you kind of just look at them as being, being like a schmuck, being a schmuck, almost like a Jerry. For those of us who watch Rick and Morty, I mean, Yeah, you know what? I think that I would say that Justin Baldoni is a Jerry. And I know a Jerry when I see one because I'm a bit of a Jerry myself. The kind of guy who isn't just very sincere, but he's achingly sincere. Even in a world where a lot of these beliefs are frequently used in a very utilitarian and cynical kind of way, Justin Baldoni, like, he clearly is a true believer. In fact, he is so much a true believer that probably a lot of guys that are not feminists probably watched a lot of this stuff and just said to themselves, like, this guy is so annoying that the dream scenario would be that some woman would come out and accuse him of something like this. And now that's what's happened. Now, me personally, I don't take any pleasure in seeing this at all, like, not one little bit. And there's one important reason why. While I don't really take seriously a lot of the specific beliefs that Justin Baldoni has, there is one on which I would say that he and I are in complete agreement, absolute lockstep, and that is on the subject of domestic abuse and domestic assault. We are both ardently, stridently against that, as frankly every man should be. But admittedly, obviously, not all men are because it still happens, right? And that is one of the most important topics that we do have to tackle, not just as men, but as a society as a whole. So obviously, the message to men is like, don't do it. And then the message to women has to be like, if this happens to you, this is what you can do. These are the resources that are available to help you. These are the people that will help you. And you're not alone should something like that ever happen to you. And so you would think that if these people, if Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, if they were even the slightest bit serious about caring about these issues, well, then you would think that they would allow this film, and in particular, like, its marketing message, to be about that. But instead, one of the things that actually seems to have, in the end, kind of driven the hijacking of this film away from Justin Baldoni was that Blake Lively wanted to make the marketing campaign largely about her her line of hair care products, and Justin Baldoni wanted it to be about domestic abuse and domestic assault awareness, and he really wanted all of that to serve women and to serve the needs of women, in the sense of, we're going to put this film together and we're going to take this thing very seriously. And we're going to make sure that we are keeping on that message. And we're going to make sure that women are empowered, just not with the sense that they don't have to tolerate domestic abuse and domestic assault, but that they can do something about it. They can do things to make themselves safe, and do things to protect themselves if they ever do end up in a situation where they're suffering from that. And instead, had Blake Lively swoop in and being like, no, got to get my hair care product in there. Like, that's what this thing was supposed to serve, apparently, instead of actually serving, that crucially important, socially pivotal subject. No, it has to be about her making a few more bucks off of some hairspray. And Ryan Reynolds helped her do that. Because Ryan Reynolds obviously does not really care about this subject. And personally, I have a very difficult time believing that at this juncture that Ryan Reynolds actually believes in very much of anything, other than himself. Making himself as famous and powerful and influential as he can be. And yeah, I'm really thinking twice now on this subject of Ryan Reynolds. And I'm thinking to myself, I was a pretty big Ryan Reynolds fan. I mean, I would rush out at the absolute earliest opportunity to see all of the Deadpool movies in particular, But now I'm kind of thinking to myself, maybe I don't need another Deadpool movie in my life badly enough that I can justify giving another single solitary red cent to Ryan Reynolds. I loved those movies, but I don't think I need them that badly. And that particular thought, it got me thinking about the film, the Baldoni film that kind of got snatched and stolen away from him, very, very unjustly. The title of that film, It Ends With Us. And it got me thinking about some of this cynical, narcissistic, predatory behavior that we see in this particular story. And I got to thinking to myself, I'm not a big Hollywood hotshot. I don't have any power in that industry whatsoever. I don't like seeing this kind of thing. But how can I stop it? And then I kind of thought about it, and I said to myself, it ends with it. It ends when these people can't make any more money off of it. At least you would think that it ends then. It ends with us. Because ultimately, we're the ones who decide if we're going to buy a movie ticket. We're the ones who are going to decide if we tune into a film on Netflix. Oh, did I just say tune in? I'm sure that's not the... It is so... Oh, man, that is so archaic. But it's too late. It's out there now. I'm sticking with it. We're the ones who decide if we go stream a movie on Netflix that Ryan Reynolds or Blake Lively are in. We're ultimately the ones who decide if they make any more money. And if we decide that they don't make any more money, they don't make any more money by doing this kind of stuff, they don't make any more money after they do this kind of stuff, well, then presumably at that point, this kind of stuff ends. So I would actually go so far as to say, yeah, you know what? It ends with us. And I think that's the power that represents to me. That is thought of that is very ingratiating. And I know that we're not going to have 100% participation in something like that, because unfortunately, somehow Blake Lively does have her defenders in this. Actually, a lot of them are also Amber Heard believers. So right there, you kind of know, like morons. Like morons and evil people who actually look at this kind of behavior as laudable and virtuous. And unfortunately, I think that there is a dark corner of feminism that actually does look at it that way. And they think to themselves that as long as you're making a woman more powerful and as long as you're hurting a man, that it justifies any kind of greasy, underhanded, sneaky, deceitful, devious behavior. Some of them actually look at this as virtuous behavior. And that's where you find Blake Lively supporters. So unfortunately, I think that there's always going to be some money out there for Reynolds and Lively. And I don't know if there's anything that we can do about that. I think that it kind of goes back to some of the thoughts that I expressed earlier in this podcast. And there's some people that you just cannot convince to do the right thing. They won't. They won't do it. If it doesn't make them feel good about themselves, if doing something that is wrong, doing something that they know that they're wrong in doing, makes them feel better about themselves than doing the right thing, they'll do that. Especially if they can do it anonymously. And who's more anonymous than a person who's just going down to the movie theater and paying $14 for a movie ticket? It's probably one of the most anonymous things that we can still do in our lives. So I don't at all expect that we'll have 100% buy-in. I don't think that we're ever going to get to the point where Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively don't have any money, because right now, those two, they have a lot of money, especially Ryan Reynolds. Blake Lively is kind of blah, she hasn't really been in, she's not that successful an artist that she can justify the kind of ego that she exhibited in this story. Right? I mean, I think the first thing that I ever saw her in was in Green Lantern. She was in Green Lantern. That was a highlight of her career. She wasn't bad in Savages. Savages, if you haven't seen it, I think it's pretty good. It's probably worth seeing if you don't have to pay any money to see it, so that you can't get any residuals. But it actually is a pretty good movie. But I mean, like, Green Lantern is the highlight of her career. Like, how important can she be? Not nearly as important as she thinks she is. And then, of course, Ryan Reynolds. I mean, he's got his gin company. I'm not going to be drinking that, but I don't drink gin anyway. So it doesn't really make a big difference. You know, I mean, he has all that money from that cell phone deal that he did a bunch of years ago. You know, he's got his, he's got his professional soccer team in Wales. And I think maybe that's something that I'll actually miss, because I did think that was such a cool thing. But such a cool thing being done by, now we discover, such like just an uncool, kind of a piece of crap. Like, I can't even support that. So I guess I'm not a Wrexham supporter anymore. Can't do that. It's too bad. I actually really liked the idea of that. But, if we have the power to bring this sort of thing to an end, then I think that we do have the responsibility to use that power. So, yeah, it ends with us. What else can you say?